Phase Zero bonus episode to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Guardians of the Galaxy. BD here, joined today by Jenna Anderson.
Hey, everybody. Very happy to be here for such a cool anniversary. This is going to be fun.
Yes, we've got Aaron Perrine.
10 years seems, what? Where did the time go?
Where did it go? What in the time stone has happened here? 10 years, August 1st, 2014, Guardians of the Galaxy hit theaters. Hard to believe it's been that long. So much has happened in the time since. But we all, I think, still look back on this movie pretty fondly. I know I do. So for today's bonus episode of Phase Zero, we have a couple special messages from cast members, a look back at a very key scene with James Gunn, and we're just going to share our memories of watching the movie, our thoughts on it, and take a quick deep dive because this movie has been analyzed and dissected and put to rest at this point. But we never got a chance to do this because this was long before Phase Zero existed. So happy birthday, Guardians of the Galaxy. I thought it would just be fun to start out by saying, like, do you remember seeing Guardians of the Galaxy for the first time? Did you remember watching the trailer? Just your memories from 2014, back when this movie came into our lives. Aaron, you're at the top of the screen. What was 2014 like for you with Guardians?
Well, I remember the announcement happening at like Comic-Con that year, or like one of those big presentations that year, and being like immediately, even for me, I'm like, who in the world? Really? We're going to do okay. All right. And sort of going from there, no one knew how it was gonna go. I was like, oh, that guy from the sitcoms is the leading actor in this, basically. I was like, what is happening? So that was my initial read. I remember from like the announcement of it anyway. See, like afterwards, of course, it's different. But yeah, first blush, I was like, hey, y'all are really going for it, huh? Like it's like a Challengers of the Unknown movie getting announced in the middle of a thing. Like, what?
Jenna, what about you?
I agree with Aaron. I feel like everybody universally was like, this is getting a movie. This is kind of nuts. Like, I definitely was not a comic expert by any means at this point when this movie was coming out. But I just remember loving the trailer so much and already loving the MCU, but loving the idea of it getting more cosmic in this kind of way, seeing like the old sci-fi influences even there. And then just the music in the trailer, just the vibe of the trailer. I watched that so many times as soon as that dropped. Like it was ridiculous how many times I watched that trailer. And then just seeing the movie, that is one of my fondest midnight movie memories. Like I went to the local one nearby me. I went with my mom. They were like giving out pins that had all of the characters on them, and like everyone was trading them back and forth to make sure that you had a complete set. It was the sweetest thing ever. I will never forget going to that movie and just seeing everyone's minds completely be blown by like what the MCU could be capable of.
Yeah. I remember watching the trailer for the first time. I was working at the Village Idiot in Columbia, South Carolina. I was a door guy. All 165 pounds of me at the time was a door guy for $40 a night. And I remember the trailer dropped. I think it was on Jimmy Kimmel Live that night. It released online, and I watched it on my phone. I could barely hear it, but I was like, this looks amazing. And I watched it over and over and over again. When I could hear it, I was showing everybody who I wanted all my friends to be as excited as I was. Nobody was. They liked the trailer, but I was so in. And then before the movie came out, they did these screenings of 15 minutes of the movie, not the first 15 minutes, but 15 minutes. It was like the jail intake scene and the prison escape scene, sort of like moments from that. And I drove all the way to Charleston, South Carolina to go see it because I was still in school at the time and I was going to USC. So it was like a 2.5 hour drive. And I just drove all the way out there just to see the 15 minutes. And I was just obsessed with this movie before it came out. And then, yeah, the midnight screenings, I think I was at the Regal or the AMC, whichever one it is, at the Sand Hills out there in Columbia, South Carolina. And I went to Comic-Con that year for the first time. And that was like the Guardians of the Galaxy victory lap year, I think, because it was right around the time the movie was opening. Or maybe right before it was opening. Mm-hmm. It opened on August 1st. And now I cannot believe it's already been 10 years. And what that experience was awesome. And I remember even Saturday Night Live was doing sketches about, they did a sketch about, this just shows people will go see anything with a Marvel logo in front of it. But it turns out Guardians was just a great movie, and that's why people went to see it. But yeah, that the soundtrack of it. Let's go with our reactions. We never got a chance to do Phase Zero, the social reaction embargo thing for Guardians of the Galaxy. Jenna, if you just saw the movie, what would you be saying about it?
See, it's hard to separate that because part of me is like the legacy of the movie since then is like the fondest stuff that I feel like I have to say about it right now. But like I said, just the first time seeing it, my mind was blown of like what a comic book movie could be capable of, what a Marvel movie could be capable of. I think it is just so fundamentally special. It's magical, and it's like the effects that it has had both on superhero movies and just on like the movie industry and the way people do team movies, the way that like the energy people try to interject comes from Guardians. And it's so cool to see that. I also like it's funny when we said we were going to do this episode, I didn't even need to rewatch this ahead of time because I had just watched this like a month or so before and it is still very fresh in my mind. So like that is how much I love this movie. It's on heavy rotation in my household.
Aaron, what about you?
I think that Guardians of the Galaxy, more than any Marvel property that's probably been released, shows you the breadth of like this franchise. Like that, literally, it could go in any possible direction if everything kind of clicks together in the right way. If that makes sense. I am, of course, on Phase Zero, like characterized as a hater of these movies. I do not hate these movies. I do not hate James Gunn. I do not hate '80s music. But I have to admit, like when I worked at, because I think around the time that Volume 2 came out, I worked at CBS Sports before, and the editors, giant Guardians of the Galaxy fans, like giant Guardians of the Galaxy fans, did not care about anything else in the MCU, probably. Like I remember the weekend that Infinity War opened, one of them said to me, one of my closer friends was like, I'm not gonna go see it. I don't really care. I'm like, Guardians, and he's like, I'm there. We're there day one. My boy Rocket's in it. Let's go. And I was like, that is amazing. I'm like, that is so wild that it's like you won't even, you're not showing for Iron Man, you're not showing for Captain America, you're Rocket Raccoon and Groot. Like that is what we're doing here, which is like amazing to think, incomprehensible to think back in 2008 when like Iron Man and like Dark Knight were like the examples of comic book movies, that this movie would also, and this franchise actually be up there with those in fan regard.
Yeah, I remember seeing this movie and just immediately being in love with it. Uh, I loved the characters tremendously. I think I just identify with like their misfit nature and how this sort of outcasts all kind of came together. And I think I identify with Star-Lord quite a bit because he's just like this dude who doesn't know his place, and he was always trying to be a little bit more than he actually felt like he was. And I don't know, it's sort of like this fake it till you make it type thing, which I definitely recognize in my career. I have put on myself quite a bit to get to this point where I feel like I'm still doing that a bit. Just the actors, the fact that they had Bradley Cooper and Vin Diesel in this movie was really cool. The soundtrack right out of the gate, the opening scene, which we'll talk about in a moment, was so emotional, and the conclusion of it with Groot. I loved the action of this movie. I loved more than anything the humor of this movie, the tone of the movie, and it for so many reasons. It was immediately honestly at this point it may have been my favorite Marvel movie. Maybe like it was Iron Man and Avengers really, but this was also right after Winter Soldier. So this felt like the movie that solidified the MCU as like, yeah, we can expand this thing. We can like, imagine what my tweet would have said. Like, I'm trying to think of like, you walk out of the screening and everybody wants to hear from you. What's your reaction to the movie? It probably would have just said something like Guardians of the Galaxy is the most fun Marvel movie to date. Chris Pratt is a superstar. The dude is absolutely shredded, and James Gunn put so much heart into this movie. But that's just like the formula of these tweets. I try to get more creative with it now, but I just love this movie. And it seems all around like this is one of the most beloved movies. It does have so much heart in it. It took a tree and made you fall in love with it. And when the tree dies before it sprouts up, spoiler alert, as a baby, you're just like, what? And Dave Bautista, this was his breakout role. I was a WWE fan, still am, but obviously I knew Bautista from his work in WWE, and we all heard about how much this role meant to him, and to see him do such a good job as Drax. And I would argue, I love DJ, I love John Cena. I would argue that Batista has shown himself to have the most range of
Mhm.
any wrestler turned actor, and this was what started that journey for him. Because at this point, I think all else he had booked in sort of a mainstream movie way was Spectre. Was it Spectre, the
Mhm.
James Bond movie? Where I don't even think he had a line. So
He had very just like random TV roles. Like he was on like an episode of Smallville. He was just like whenever they needed like a big beefy guy, that was kind of where he was. And it's like it's so crazy to now see how this movie was, like you said, like the flashpoint for his career, getting to the point of having Blade Runner, having Knock at the Cabin, having all of these like super thoughtful roles. So
Yeah. No, fantastic movie. Cannot believe it's already 10 years old. And it seems Bautista himself can't either. So subscribe to the channel. We're about to take a deep dive. But first, a little memory from Dave Bautista about Guardians of the Galaxy.
You know, I don't know if they'd be fun memories as much as they would be emotional memories. It's, you know, it's weird. I can tell you one fun memory. When we were there filming, I went to the movies to see a film I did called Riddick. And Chris Pratt came with me. And we brought a few friends and we went out and just sat in the theater. We walked down the streets of London, sat in a public theater and watched it, and nobody stopped us. You know, I might have gotten stopped a couple times and people want pictures. They knew me from WWE. Right. It would be a nightmare for Chris Pratt to go in public at this point. But that was like back then we could, you know, we both went out and we went to a public theater and watched Riddick, my movie, right. You know? So it's like how things have changed.
Man, I love Dave. Dave is just the nicest guy. And it is cool to see that. I mean, Chris Pratt blew up after this movie. So all right, we're going to dive into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, 10 years later now. You know, we're not going to do like an hour-long discussion with every Easter egg. You already know all the Easter eggs, but I thought there's some fun ones to talk about. And you got to start with the opening scene of this movie. I think it's the coldest take possible to say this is the most emotional opening scene of any Marvel movie. I can't think of one that's even close. The fact that Peter, what's that?
If anything, I would say like the ones like something like Infinity War, of like watching Loki die in Infinity War. But even then, that's like a decade of that journey culminating in such a surprising way. But like pure emotion and pure heart and like hitting the ground running with a character we just met, there's nothing that's on this level.
Yep.
If you add the we just met in, sure, but Wakanda Forever's beginning is heart-wrenching.
That is true. Yes, that is true. Yes. Yeah.
No, I overlooked that 100%. That was tough.
Yeah.
That was tough. But for a cold open let me preface it with that then. For a cold open for an introduction to a franchise with no real world implications as well.
Yeah.
My goodness, this scene was heavy. And I'm gonna add a real world implication. It's Peter Quill as a kid watching his mother die of cancer. At this point in my life, my mother had beaten cancer twice, and it took everything for her to beat it. And it felt so personal to me in that moment. And I was just like, wow, I was crying in the first scene, man. And the second time she beat it was within 2 years of this movie coming out. It was like 2012, 2013. And that scene hit me really, really hard. And then it's just like, I just fell in love with Peter Quill right out of the gate because he becomes this wisecracker who obviously literally puts on a mask, but puts on this mask to kind of hide the fact that he does have these emotions and this insecurity about him and all this stuff while he's trying to find himself, and he's reluctant to find family because of how much pain it brought him before. And I think that opening sequence is just an incredible way to start this franchise. And that leads to seeds, which lead to sequels, like Lila being a known associate of Rocket, which is kind of a weird little.
I remember writing about this when Volume 3 came out, because I remember even before the movie was starting, James was like, there's one thing I'm really going to have to retcon in order to make Volume 3 work. And I'm really like frustrated that I have to do this. And it probably most likely was that Lila is listed as a known associate. It is so much more heartbreaking to now know that like Lila has this reputation, like just from Rocket talking about her and not from actually being out in the world and being this, you know, spacefaring character the way that she is in the comics. Like it now is so much sadder, but it really, really works for me that they found a way to like make that moment so much more emotional.
Mm-hmm. And with Rocket's story, just the tragedy starts here too, because you see the teases of like the robotic implants in his back. And the scene later when he's drunk and he hates being called rodent. He's like, I didn't ask to be torn apart and put back together over and over. Like at the time, yes, that was emotional. Those were great sequences of Bautista and Pratt and Zoe acting with whatever Sean Gunn, I guess, in the green suit, which would later become Rocket Raccoon. But then when you see Guardians 3 and you look back at that, you're just, whoa, damn, Rocket really had a lot going on, man. And that was such a great way to tell the story too. I was instantly interested and wanted to know more, and it paid off later.
Yeah.
Whew.
I added a note that I also find sad, but in a very poignant way. So when I rewatched this most recently, I had to scrub through the volume 3 and the trailers and stuff to check something. I'm 99% sure that when Gamora and Peter are talking about the Walkman, talking about Kevin Bacon, and they kind of almost kissed, and you hear "fool around and fell in love," I'm pretty sure that is the same exact spot where they then say goodbye at the end of volume 3 with the whole "I bet we were fun." So I checked, I looked at the stuff on the wall, I looked at everything, and it's I'm 99% sure that's the same exact set, which is genius of James Gunn to do, because it is shot in a way where you couldn't really tell at first, but it makes it so much more heartbreaking that is ultimately where we get.
One might say she fell for his pelvic sorcery. After all, I mean, that moment was great. This is romance. This is the thing Jamie, who's not here today to talk about this with us, just always loves. And I mean, I love it too. Pepper and Tony. I love a good romance story. Star-Lord and Gamora was a great one. And it started right there in that scene where, he's fooled around and fell, and I can't sing anymore. We'll get taken down. And then I bet we were, oh, God, yeah. I was rooting for my boy, though. And then, they end up crashing on the ship, and he's just like, I don't know what happened. Something just truly heroic came over me. And I was like, bro, this guy's hilarious. And those scenes in space also, I always, thought they were really cool. Never seen anything like that in the MCU before. The hair moving, all that stuff. And I was thinking to myself while watching it, was this filmed underwater? How'd they pull that off? And at the Guardians 3 junket, I did get to ask James Gunn that question. And he said, yes, they filmed those underwater, and he will never film underwater again. But I thought that was like me in college was thinking, wow, this looks like it was filmed underwater. And then however many years later with Guardians 3, I got to ask that question.
That's cool.
Yeah. Okay, we talked about that note. Gamora and Nebula, their sibling rivalry is introduced via Thanos, really.
Mm-hmm.
I was hyped to see Thanos in this because at the time, I read Infinity Gauntlet. I had seen Avengers. I was like, oh, this purple guy is going to be a menace. I can't wait to see more. At the time, I was like, that's it. That's all we get. Looking back, I'm like, you know what? This wasn't his movie. Very well done to put him in there. Cool to see him after pulling the strings in Avengers, but also the disrespect. You feel Nebula's pain when Thanos says things like, you alienated my favorite daughter, Gamora. And she's just like, thanks, Dad. And James Gunn knows how to pull on your heartstrings, man, when he writes these things.
I misremembered how little he's in this movie, and I love how little he's in this movie. We talked about this on our most recent live show, just talking about, do you need to have introduced Thanos a little bit more? And I think the scenes that he is in this movie, every single line of dialogue, every single action that he does is so effective that it speaks volumes. It really covers so much in such a short amount of time.
I will bathe the stars in your blood. Like, yo,
yeah,
he was menacing. He was scarier than Kang in that scene than in everything we got from Kang, maybe besides the Loki finale of season 1 before he died.
Yeah.
Then we go to the Collector's Lair. I remember this was the first time in a Marvel movie, maybe besides Thor's vault, Odin's vault in Thor, where I was like, what? Oh, Easter egg. What's that? You have a dark elf in there. You had the Chitauri soldiers from the first Avengers movie, and Cosmo was in there,
and Howard the Duck.
Howard the Duck was in there, both of whom would appear in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The Infinity Stones were what the Collector was after. That's what was in the orb. So they brought the purple stone, opened it up. What was her? Karina the woman there who was the same race as Barit from the opening scene. And if you took a black light to his ship, it would look it was kind of adult humor too for the first time, mature humor. That's a joke that kids aren't going to get, but adults are going to be like, oh my God, not quite Deadpool, but mature and funny. She raunchy humor a bit, not quite crossing the line though. But the Infinity Stones, not much Thanos, but we do get the Infinity Stones history lesson. And at Guardians 3, well, just look what James Gunn revealed about that sequence.
I wrote that scene in about an hour and a half. Just came up with what the Infinity Stones were. Everything's based on that. They're like, we're thinking about putting the power stones. I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's the collector had power stones, and I just made up this bullshit. That's what it is. Anyway,
And that's how the Marvel Cinematic Universe came together.
So,
When I heard that, and I was a little bit like, damn, man, I put so much stock in this. I've been invested in that story for so long, but yeah, it is I guess that's how these things happen.
It's superhero comics in a nutshell. The biggest concepts, the biggest ideas, almost all of them really spawn from the shortest possible amount of time. So I love that something as big as the Infinity Stones could have started in that context.
Yeah.
Whenever anybody's like, "Oh my God, the plans," blah 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 blah, go
Yeah.
ahead and play them that clip.
I really think the MCU in the early days and now really embraced the wrestling style storytelling.
Yeah.
They were like, we have a lot of ideas, we want to plant seeds and all this stuff. And I think they figured things out as they went with ideas that started to take shape, and you could build to the big headline eventually and take your time, slow burn. People are going to want it. But then I think they kind of tried to overplan and then kind of underplan as well in phase 4 because they were doing too much at once. And it ended up not working as well. Like the term anchor being out of Deadpool could be a huge factor in Doomsday and Secret Wars. It might not matter at all, but because there's such a positive response to it, maybe now that they have time because they're not stacking so many projects on top of each other, you can build on that like they seemingly did with what James Gunn did with the Infinity Stones and Guardians of the Galaxy.
I
Here's
wonder
hoping.
if Ryan Reynolds has seen Across the Spider-Verse or any of
Probably.
that. Probably.
I mean, anchor being is currently like the new canon event trend.
Yeah.
They're all the same thing. And there will be a joke where all of them are the same thing gets pointed out by someone smarter than the main characters. I'm sure. I'm positive.
I mean, it's probably going to be Doom.
Maybe.
But this is the Guardians of the Galaxy 10-year anniversary special.
Let's go.
Dance off, you and me. Okay. The movie culminates with Peter Quill having a dance off with Ronan. When I saw this in theaters, I was like, what the f is this? I did not like it. I'm not going to lie.
Wow.
This was my only problem with the movie. It has since grown on me tremendously.
I was going to say, go from that to you singing bye, bye, bye nonstop at this point. It's like you've definitely evolved a little bit. I also like it feels small to say it's just that the dance off happens. That happens, but then also just like the scene of all of them holding the orb together and the manifestation of it literally being like, we will carry your pain and your trauma like as a group. You don't have to do it yourself. I'm almost about to start crying just thinking about it because that is just like such a cool way to culminate the movie and then also have the narrative dissonance of also having the dance off.
You said it yourself with Guardians of the Galaxy. That was good stuff, man. Oh, this movie's so good.
I just think about the response to some of the later, more comic, goofy things and how visceral it is against it. And then this thing is actually like a part of the franchise celebrated in Avengers Campus. Like Deadpool and Wolverine are in this right now in Anaheim.
Yeah.
You can go watch it.
Right.
Which is kind of hilarious at the same time.
I loved the mystery of Peter Quill's father being introduced in this. We all go, Jason? No, it's Ego the Living Planet. Okay, that's why, Glenn Close's Nova Prime was saying, well, he's part Terran, but part of him is not of this world. It's the Celestial, which we could have never predicted at the time. I enjoyed that. The Nova Corps introduction, fantastic, even though most of them got wiped, even though they got his dick message. Like, there's just so many one-liners and stuff in this movie that made me just pop laughing. And Rocket, at the end, he's like, well, what if somebody has something and I take it from them? Well, that's stealing. Well, what if I wanted more? What if I remove his spine? Well, that's murder. That's the worst crime you could commit. Like, we forget John C. Reilly was in the MCU.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a movie. And the credit scene with Groot dancing. Come on. And,
iconic.
Guardians of the Galaxy, or Awesome Mixtape Volume 2 is playing because Pete got that emotional letter from his mom that he didn't open until he was like emotionally ready to open it, which finally happened by the fact that he found a family. He opened it. He cried. We cried. He played the music. Groot starts dancing. And every time Drax looks at Groot, after the "We Are Groot" line, God, come on. Can't beat this movie. I mean, maybe they can, depending on your taste, but it is just such a good movie. Hard to believe this so long ago.
And you mentioned Easter eggs at the top of this. People have still never found the Easter egg that James Gunn teases is in this movie. There's been so many theories. There's been so many false leads. I feel like he's debunked a lot of them. He's obviously stopped debunking them because he's a little preoccupied with his current job. But I will be very curious to see, A, if anyone ever finds it, and B, if no one finds it, when he is eventually going to tell us what it is.
Yep. I am man, I hope you wrote it down.
It would be the funniest thing if he just forgot, and then now it's like he has to keep the bit up.
Yeah. I remember going into the movie, there was a lot of hype around the credit scene. And I, for one, expected, like, there was a hot rumor online at the time. I don't remember where it came from. This was 10 years ago. That Iron Man in a spacesuit was going to come find the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I fully believed that. And James Gunn was typing stuff saying, like, I believe we have the best post-credit scene. I love our post-credit scene. Like, and it was so hyped up. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And then it was Howard the Duck sipping a freaking martini. And I was like, are you kidding me? No Iron Man. You know me. If there's no Iron Man, I'm pissed. But no, that was funny. And Cosmo's licking. Whose face was Cosmo licking?
The Collector, I think.
Oh, you let him lick your face like that?
Yeah.
Gross. Yeah, the Collector. Poor Collector. Lair got fully destroyed. I'm sure there's so much about Guardians of the Galaxy we could talk about. It's all been talked about. Clearly, we're just going through some key points here and having fun talking about it 10 years later. We also reached out to Karen Gillan, asked her to talk about something from the movie. Nebula herself has a little message for the Phase Zero audience. Richard, can you roll it?
Hello, how's it going? Karen Gillan here, aka Nebula. Okay, what is my favorite memory from the first Guardians film? That is hard. That's really hard. I mean, just even getting that role was like a small miracle for me, and I was like, am I going to get fired? Because it was just such a dream come true, but I didn't get fired, and I'm still here, so that's good. Okay, it was probably learning how to fight with Zoe Saldana. That was pretty cool. I'd never fought before in my life. I'd done a few sort of smaller action sequences in this TV show Doctor Who that I did, but really never dove fully into it. And then I had suddenly the best people in the world training me how to fight, and that was really cool. And then I got to fight with my sister Zoe, and loved it. It was a really cool experience. There's so many more, but that's the first one that sprung to mind. All right, thanks. Bye.
She's the best.
I love that. I love that she mentioned Doctor Who because that era was very special. I literally met her at a con while this movie was filming, and she like already had the shaved head and everything. And so it was the weirdest thing in the Doctor Who fandom of like, oh my gosh, she's in the MCU.
All right. Now it comes the time. We've never done this on Phase Zero with Guardians of the Galaxy. 10 years later, we're going to give it a review score out of 10. Aaron, you're at the top of the screen. How are you feeling on a 10 scale about Guardians of the Galaxy?
So full disclosure, I'm sure that in the inevitable rankings episode, I don't know where it'll go. I don't know what it'll do. But the Guardians of the Galaxy is about working together and about found family. In an effort not to bring the review score of this movie down at all, I'm going to give it an 8.2 out of 10 to let everybody have their fun the way I wish most internet would let everybody have their fun with stuff. So there you go.
8.2. Jenna, how you feeling about it? What's your review score?
My gut reaction was to say 10 out of 10, but I do feel like I could probably be a little bit more honest. It's definitely at like a 9.6. I think it is definitely one of my favorites of the entire MCU. It will forever hold a special place in my heart. Even just rewatching it, I felt transported back to 10 years ago, seeing it for the first time and where I was at in my life and stuff. And so it is definitely one of the highest up there in terms of purely MCU movies.
All right. And for me, listen, I gave this score when I was doing movie reviews for free at the local Fox station in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm sticking with it 10 years later. Listen, Guardians of the Galaxy is a 10 out of 10 for me. I adore this movie. There are only a very small handful of MCU movies I would give a 10 out of 10. Now, maybe that doesn't mean the critic score, whatever. This is my personal opinion. There's really nothing you could do to make me like this movie more. Well, you could have put Nova in there. But other than that, this movie is fantastic. I fell in love with these characters immediately. I felt the emotion of this movie. I fell in love with a tree and a raccoon and a green lady and a blue lady and a guy who left Earth and became part of this cosmic band of misfits. And I got to watch Dave Bautista twirl knives around. Like, come on, it's good stuff. And Ronan was a great, one of the better villains of the MCU, I would say. this movie's 10 out of 10 for me. And just, I love this movie. I love Guardians of the Galaxy. And for that reason, perfect score. So that leaves Phase Zero's review score of Guardians of the Galaxy at a 9.3 out of 10. I had to do it on my computer because I don't know where my phone is. I've been dialed in. I haven't been distracted by phone notifications this whole episode. I just can't find it. So 9.3 out of 10 for Guardians of the Galaxy 10 years later. Send us your thoughts on Guardians of the Galaxy because it is insane to believe this has been 10 years. Huge thanks to Bautista and Karen Gillan for sending us a quick little message about it. Good luck to James Gunn with Superman. Congratulations on wrapping production. Before we know it, we'll be saying it's been 10 years since Superman, which is crazy to think about. We are more than halfway to this journey with Infinity War. Infinity War is 6 years old. Endgame is half as old as Guardians of the Galaxy. It's already 5 years old. So hopefully Phase Zero is still around to be doing this because genuinely this is my favorite part of the job is doing Phase Zero. You know, especially at Comic-Con. After that, I have a whole new revitalized love for this Phase Zero show, for this community that we've built. And after Deadpool and Wolverine and going in the direction the MCU is going, it feels like we're really getting to be a part of something cool and be part of the conversation with you all. And hopefully there's a lot more years to come. 10 years of Guardians of the Galaxy. Jenna, any last words for today's show?
It's at Hey, it's Jenna Lynn on social media. And as always, go read some comics. Go read Guardians of the Galaxy comics. Go read the Abnett and Lanning run, which is a huge influence on these movies, especially the costumes that they wear in Volume 3 are literally pulled from that run. So that's a good place to start.
Abnett and Lanning also wrote great Nova books.
Yeah.
Aaron.
Oh, what's going on, guys? Sound like Hornet. Look out for more of us from San Diego Comic-Con and other fun interviews. I know that there's a couple that BD still has in the chamber ready to roll. And man, I can't wait to see what other movies turn 10 that I don't realize to be horrified by the unmitigated marching of time.
In most states, Iron Man is old enough to drive.
That's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
My goodness gracious. All right, y'all. That is our Guardians of the Galaxy 10-year anniversary special episode. Thank you so much for hanging with us on Phase Zero. Play our show for your mom, play it for your dog. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on all the major podcast platforms. Hit me up at Brandon Davis BD if you haven't gotten tired of me yapping yet. And we will see you on Monday for a very special Phase Zero Spotlight episode. See you there.